Hi, my name is Amy. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm starting a new project. I am working on a late 18th century inspired Tinkerbell costume. I have made 18th century garments before, but I haven't made late 18th century before. So I needed to make some new foundation garments. Instead of pocket hoops, this costume will use a false rump. And so that's what we're going to be making in today's video. I will show you the process I followed to draft the pattern and make the false rump. I will also show you the things that I could have done differently to make the process a little bit easier on myself. So with that, let's get sewing. What are you doing on my sewing table?
On my computer.
Yeah. Taking out my sewing table, that's what you're doing. Our youngest daughter has been saving money to buy herself a computer, and she and Todd were putting it together on my big cutting table when I was ready to make this false rump. So I used the space next to my sewing machine. The first thing I did was get a piece of paper the approximate size of the false rump. I drew a straight line down the center of the paper, and then I used my French curve to draw a curve along the waistline and along the outer edge. I ended up having to widen the outer edge because I didn't make it quite wide enough with the first drawn piece. After that, I cut the pattern out of the paper and got it ready to cut out of fabric. After getting it cut out, I marked the quilting lines on the pattern and pinned it to 2 layers of fabric folded in half. I'm using a pretty heavy canvas duck cloth for this false rump, just to give it a little extra structure. Once it was all pinned, I cut the pattern out of the fabric, and then I used a water erasable marker to mark the quilting lines on the edge of each piece of fabric. After the fabric was unpinned, I used my straight quilting ruler to draw the lines on both pieces of fabric. The 2 pieces of fabric were pinned right sides together, and I matched up the center of the bum pad on the front and back, and also each of the quilting lines and the corners. I used 1/2 inch seam allowance to stitch all the way around the false rump, leaving a small opening at the top to turn it through later on. The corners were clipped and the curves were trimmed just to make turning a little bit easier. Even though this is going to be full of stuffing, I wanted to have an easy time turning it to the right side out. And this is where I realized I made a mistake. I originally planned to sew the pieces together and then stitch the quilting lines from the outside of the fabric before I stuffed it. However, in order for that to work, I would have needed to leave the entire top seam open instead of just the small opening. So filling each section and quilting it was more difficult than it should have been, but I made it work. I just stuffed each section as tight as I wanted it and then pinned about a ½ inch away from each of the stitching lines to give myself space for when it was time to actually stitch the quilting lines. I also pinned about a ½ inch seam allowance at the top just so that there was a flat edge that could be worn against the body. In the long run, I think it would have been easier for me to just take the stitching out of the top of the seam of the false rump, but this is what I did, and so this is what I'm showing you. But I think if I would have taken that stitching out, I could have just stitched those quilting lines like I originally planned, stuffed it from the top, and then hand sewed it closed. I think that would have been a lot easier because this way I needed to stuff each section individually and then pin it and then go to the next section. It just was tedious. For the stuffing, I have a huge bag of polyfill that I've had for probably 7 or 8 years, and so I just used as much of that as I could to try to get it out of my storage and out of my stash. Once each of the sections was completely stuffed full of polyfill and everything was pinned, I stitched along the quilting lines and removed those pins. Then I edge stitched along the top edge of the false rump to close it, and I also stitched a ½ inch away from that to form, like I said, the little flat piece that would end up sitting against the body and the stays. It also gave me a nice flat surface to attach the waist straps to.
I like big butts and I cannot lie.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you're looking to make your own 18th century false rump, I hope you found it helpful. If you liked this video, please hit the thumbs up, and if you would like to see more content from me, please subscribe. And if you hit the little bell, YouTube will let you know every time I upload. Thanks for watching. Bye.